Thanks for bearing with me and hanging around. I was a little bit uncertain about the topic to talk to here. Usually I only talk to people in gaming. We're a games company, Space Ape. Is anyone here in games or used to work in games? Okay, one very, very cautious hand there. So, so one of my concerns, I guess, is a lot of what we do in product is sort of turbocharged life cycles. We're making new product every 6 months, every 3 months, almost consistently, and throwing stuff out and starting from scratch. And so, maybe not everything I talk about here is relevant. I wasn't quite sure what to pick and choose, so I figured I'll just tell a story about the last couple of years of our company and how we've changed the way we think about product and development and what that's done, and hopefully that's useful. If not, blame Nuno, because he convinced me to come on. So for those who don't know, Space Ape is a 5-year-old mobile gaming company. We have been around for 5 years, and in that time we've generated about 100 million in sales, 35 million people played our games, and just last month we entered in a transaction with Supercell to acquire a majority stake of the company. So it's been a great ride the last 5 years, and really the story of us is really in two parts. And for the first few years we had a very very specific approach to product development, which was really born out of survival, and then we really changed how we worked last year. And so I'll talk a bit about that, and hopefully it's interesting. So here are our games, 3 games in the sort of build and battle genre, which if you're familiar with Clash of Clans, they're games like that, and one arcade shooter. And really the first few years of our company looked a bit like this. We started off making this sports game called Call It. And it was a very innovative, risky play. The idea was you're betting on what was going to happen in a sporting event in real time. It was ahead of its time, clearly, and after about 6 months we killed it. It was good for starting the company, getting a team together, raising some money. But what we realized that actually the winning formula on the platforms at that time, the App Store and Google Play, was making more traditional games. And so we pivoted about 6 months after starting the company and made Samurai Siege our first game. When we made that game, we looked at Clash of Clans, and we were the first to follow it. So we took that game, improved it in a few ways, and that game did very well for us and got us out of the gate. And then about 3 months after that game launched, we split the team and started working on a game called Rival Kingdoms, which was a more core MMO version but following a similar format. And so half the company was working on the new game, half the company was keeping the old game going and updating it and paying the bills. Then about 6 months after Rival Kingdoms launched, in May 2015, we did the same thing again and split the company again and had a team working on a game called Transformers, which we had a license from Hasbro to make, and 2 teams that continued to keep the old games alive and paying the bills. And so it was very much this mentality of betting the whole company on the next game, which meant we had to make the game with a high degree of certainty because we had a limited runway. Even when we were profitable, these games have a life cycle, they decline, and so we're always thinking in these 3 years about what is this game going to pay the bills in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, 12 months' time. Quite stressful, but we did pretty well. But then last year we blew up that model. And at the start of last year, we were 100 people based down in Soho working on those 3 games. And by the end of the year, we were still around 100 people, but we were working on 7, going on 8. And I'll talk a little bit about how we made that transition over the year. The reason we made that transition is it's a very competitive, maturing space at the moment. And if you look at the sorts of games and games companies that are being successful, the production bars, the budgets are getting very high. They're resembling more like Hollywood film launches, many dozens of people, tens of millions of dollars, many years of production, working with IPs. There's a lot of big IPs in this. But for the most part, the games that follow that model, no one's going to be talking about them in 10 years' time. The games that people will be talking about in 10 years' time are the ones that sort of came from nowhere, with small teams, seemingly came from nowhere. And that was the model that was delivering breakthrough successes. And we looked at what was happening and realized that if we kept doing what we were doing, just making the next game, we could certainly eke out a nice living, growing 10-20% a year, but it wouldn't get us to where we want to be, which is the top of that chart. And so we started thinking about these companies that are really, breaking through, following a model where they were innovating and being really creative. What were they doing? We started trying to deconstruct what we thought about creativity. And this quote sums it up perfectly for me. We spent a lot of time thinking about how our processes and how we can structure the company to reflect this reality that when you're doing something that's new and creative, you have periods of self-doubt and you need to push through and you go through this cycle. So how can we organize ourselves to reflect this? And we spent a bit of time sort of reflecting on our collective PTSD from previous companies where we hadn't been happy or we'd seen really talented people move on, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure that we understood all those mistakes that we'd made personally and we'd seen made in previous lives. And the one that resonated most with me was this idea that really talented people don't work well in this environment of any nature. If you've got a lot of cooks in the kitchen, it creates all kinds of problems. Example, I'm not going to name the company, I was a product manager at a company that was very successful at what it did. Very innovative, it broke through, and I had a team, an engineering team, that worked on the stuff that I wanted, and there were more things we wanted to do than we had capacity to work on. And so at one point or other we started putting in project managers in there to help triage the requirements that were going to the engineering team, just make sure we were working on the right stuff, that we didn't do a lot of rework, and that improved the efficiency of the whole thing, and that was great. And then we had multiple products that had to collaborate with each other, and so started to build an ecosystem around the product managers of people who can help make sure we are really actually making the right decisions and making the right products. So we had concept designers, business analysts, and that was really great because it meant that when these requirements flowed through to the project managers, my project managers should be very, very confident that it was a good call and they'd trust it. And then we started having business owners and program managers because we had different systems, and eventually this whole ecosystem, each incremental step that we made to make that process more efficient and deal with the fact that there's more stuff that we wanted to do than we had capacity to do, led to an environment where everything was moved very, very slowly. And then inevitably, you have this Valley VC who comes in with this organizational theory, and they say, look, you've got to look at the number of people, the ratio of people who are deciding what to do and the people actually doing the work. And some magic number that was thrown around was, look, for every one person figuring out what to do, there should be 7 people doing it. And when we looked at all the different roles, we had 3 people figuring out what should be done for every person actually doing something. I don't recommend or envy anyone going through this process. It was terrible. But the solution was to basically get rid of anyone with a P in their title and hire back about 1 in 20 of them. So I was one of the lucky ones. It was an awful time, but I learned a lot through this process. And at first it was very awkward because I was so used to working at a certain pace that I couldn't keep the requirements getting fed into the dev team. And the developers would start filling in the gaps and filling in the assumptions that I'd left open, and inevitably they'd make the wrong choices. But over time, they learned product management isn't rocket science. It can be taught, it can be learned, and it can be absorbed in parts. And I think this was a big learning for me that we kind of hold pretty too religiously in the company. We try and keep this ratio really lean. One of the other things that I'd messed up is and it's very common in gaming companies, you think about, oh, I want to do more games, and so I should figure out ways to make the whole process of making games more efficient. For a long time I built platforms that would make the game development process easier or more effective. And sure, it makes sense if someone's making a game, they shouldn't have to code a new payment system. It makes sense to have a common one. And that was a really bad move as well. Because every bit of energy that someone's putting towards something that isn't creating the next big game is a waste. And every dependency that you impose on someone who you want to move quickly and test stuff and iterate is a headwind. So we're very, very committed to not having any central tech. All of those 8 teams, they operate completely independently. If they want to run a separate tech stack, reinvent the wheel, they can do it if it makes sense for them. We do promote code sharing, we do promote and encourage collaboration, and we find that organically people tend to be sharing code, but we don't mandate it. So there were kind of 2 lessons that we brought in from previous lives, and we were doing pretty well. The market perceived us as a really solid bet. We'd raised a ton of money from investors, we were getting the best developers in the world want to come and work for us. But we had this inkling that if we kept doing what we were doing, we would just be eking out a living for the next 5 years, and this would come back to haunt us. And so we looked at what we were doing wrong, and we realized we were running this really command and control slate. The stress of choosing the next game, it had to work. It couldn't fail. Otherwise, we'd all have to go back and get real jobs. That really weighed on our mind, and so there was a real command and control approach to deciding what we're going to work on. It wasn't just the founders. It wasn't me. It was a brain trust of people, but it was it was someone telling the teams what game to make next. We had this presumption of, that everything had to get bigger and better. Our first game took 6 months and was 8 people. The next game was 12 months and it was 16 people. The last game, the third game was 18 months and it was over 40 people at its peak. And this was because we were on this hamster wheel of escalating expectations that we saw. Production values in the market were increasing. We had to keep up. And there was really no margin of error, and the bets were getting bigger. And realized actually that the risky approach was to keep making these safe bets, because sooner or later the next game's going to be 80 people, and that's not going to work for us. So, we were very sensible in these decisions. We were doing it because we needed money. We need to pay the bills next year, and so each of these decisions, like the layering of the program managers and the project managers and the senior group program directors in my previous job, they all made sense at the time, but the big picture, when you zoomed out, it wasn't really getting us where we needed to go. And actually, one of the solutions we tripped over, it was an accident. One of the things that plagues free-to-play game development is the idea of making a game that people download for free, they can play forever, and you monetize them over time. So you need to keep maintaining the game and operating as a service. One of the traps that all of us inevitably fall into is those games get more and more expensive to maintain. And so this is a graph of revenue on our first game, Samurai Siege. Scale here was making 50K a day or so, and after about 18 months, we're down to sort of 20 to 30. And we had some good people on here, and it seemed inevitable that this game was going to decline. And so what we needed to do was, rather than keep our best people on that game, trying to keep it alive, trying to keep feeding the beast, we should take them off and go after a bigger opportunity. Something that was, had a shot at paying the bills next year, because the way this game was going, it wouldn't. So we had, 12 to 16 people at any given time on the game during this period, and we pulled them off and replaced them with 4. And a strange thing happened. We pulled off our best guys, by the way. The 4 people that were left, they were the B team, and they would not dispute that. They're awesome now, but at the time they were unproven, or they were young, or they just hadn't shone. And so, and management was all focused on the new games. So we left this little motley band of people to look after the game, and a strange thing happened. The revenue started going up. And not only did it arrest the decline and get more efficient, which is really all we wanted them to do, but they started growing. This game's making more money 2 years later than it was at this point. And we still only have 3 people on it. And this was really the aha moment for us when we realized actually, these games can be run really leanly. If we focus on tooling, we focus on empowerment, and we set people up for success. A 16-person team, there was just too much bureaucracy, too much need for too much consensus sort of decision making for people to do the right thing. And of course, we didn't just rip people off. We built them tools so that the guys managing this game could do stuff that, from a player's perspective, felt like the game was being kept alive. So they were managing the game much as an e-commerce content manager would manage inventory and sales and that sort of thing. So the equivalent in gaming would be you can create new troops, you can create events, you can run promotions and special offers and that sort of thing. So we tooled them up. We didn't just leave them to their own devices. And so we'd really solved the first problem that was holding us back, which is learn to operate the games that are paying the bills efficiently. So the next question is, what do we do with these people that we've freed up? And what we need to do is get more ideas on the table. We wanted to push the decision making about what game we should make down as close as possible to people doing the work. And so we needed to create space for creativity. So we mandated a thing called Ape Space, which is sets times during the month where the whole company had to do down tools. They weren't allowed to work on their day job. They had to do something that helped towards the future. And we experimented with a few different structures. One was completely unstructured. You can work on whatever you like. Sometimes it would be more focused. Sometimes it would be personal development related, just learn a new skill, that kind of thing. And on average, it's 2 days a month. On a heavy month, we might do 3 or 4. On a slow month, we might do 1. So it's a significant investment of time. But as a result, we got a lot more creative ideas in through the funnel. And the breakthrough on this happened over about a year. The breakthrough was putting tight constraints on this creativity. So the game jams where we just said, work on whatever you think will be a big hit. They're a bit hit and miss. And the most successful one, sort of early on, we had was we're making a kart racing game, which is a very difficult genre to crack on mobile. No one has done it. And one of the many reasons is really hard to get the controls right on a touch screen. And so we just said, okay, 2 days, whole company swarming on this problem, solve the controls of this particular game. So very much on rails through to, say, a month where it was all about competitive real-time games. And so we'd bring guest speakers into the office. We'd have a steady program of videos that are shown at lunch and an education around the type of game that we were talking about. And as a result, the juices started flowing, and now this is a really core part of how we sort of fuel the creativity of the business, is force people to stop doing their day job to focus on the future. And we weren't really, we were making good progress on that, but we realized actually one of the big bottlenecks we had was the creative engineers. And this is an ad from really early days of Electronic Arts, and I really like this term. They describe the people who are making the games as software artists. There's no product manager there. There's no lead designer. There's no development lead. There's no UX designer. They're all just software artists. And we realized that our true bottleneck was actually the all-rounder developer who had a sense for what was fun and could code and like, that was the real bottleneck. It's not to say they're any better or worse than the person who's a really, really solid engineer. But at the time we only had 2 of these guys, which meant we could only have 2 new ideas coming through the pipe at any given time. And we realized we couldn't hire these people. We had to make them. And so through the game jams and through the unstructured time and through the focus on the creativity and the education, we brought up a bunch of people who are now very, very talented and very, provide an amazing level of throughput when it comes to new ideas. And none of them were hired with that in mind. None of them were obvious. It was all something that we had to cultivate and sort of happen organically. Creative engineering, focusing on encouraging people to try new things, to experiment, to fail, collaborate. And we also got very diligent about killing stuff. It's very easy for us to kill bad ideas. When you have a game, the stats are bad, Killing it is easy. It's the good ideas that we really struggle to kill, and which are so important to kill. So during last year, we killed a number of ideas that were quite far in development. Some of them, 12 people spent 6 months, and they were really going hardcore at it, and they really believed in it. But for one reason or other, when we asked the questions, is this thing going to be that $1 billion game, that big hit? They couldn't hand on their heart say, I've got high confidence of that. So we killed 4 or 5 games that we would have been proud to ship a year earlier, and each of them would have been moderately successful and probably paid the bills, but we really wanted to hold out till we had something we thought was great. And so bringing that into the culture and making sure that we encourage this and in fact made it a requirement for people to really be self-critical and understand whether they're working on the right thing was important. But at the same time, giving people the rope to continue to invest in that game. So one of the mistakes we made early on is we set this expectation that actually the whole company should be behind your game. And so what would happen is people come with prototypes, they'd share it, they'd run a survey, and if 75% of the company gave you the thumbs up, they go, great, this is an endorsement. I'm going to go and win over the last 25. And what we found is everyone started reverting to the mean. And we started all we'd done was sort of systematize the process that we were going through the previous few years and just picking safe things. So now it's no longer a requirement. The majority of the company backs your idea for a game team to kick off. In fact, if that is the case, then that's usually a red flag. And we do require that you get a minimum quorum of people behind it and supporting it. But all of our projects that are in development now, the ones that I'm most excited about, a third of the company are really excited about, and a third of them hate it and think we should kill it. And so that's the kind of creative tension that we really like to see. We also struggled a bit with incubation. We had an incubation, sort of like a skunk works type setup. We had some people who were quite good at ideation, coming up with ideas and sort of thing. It didn't work for us. I still think it can work because I do see people that can drop in and out of projects and provide a ton of value because they just wired that way. But my experience with the incubator was we ran this for about 6 months. And there was a core group of 3 or 4 people, and they'd rope in people who were passionate about the idea they were working on at any given time. The thing they were working on any given week, there was always someone on the team that was just punching the clock waiting for the next idea to come through the pipe. And as a result, the team's never really committed to any single idea. So something we'll try again maybe in the future, but because in theory I still believe it can work, but it hasn't worked for us. So end result, we changed the way we were thinking from what am I going to work on next, more to creating this sort of light process, but more an environment and culture to put ideas into the top of a funnel and filter them out and get to the bottom. And as a result, we've killed quite a lot of ideas, and we've got a few great ones in the pipe. And that's sort of how we changed the way we're thinking about our product. And I guess the 3 big lessons that I learned, I think, was that through this whole experience, I realized that the best people really thrive with a lot of autonomy, a lot of space, but it's not for everyone. We didn't retain some people through this process because they needed the structure, they needed the job titles, they needed the direction, they needed that sort of more corporate environment. So it scared off some people, but I think it also brought out the best of the most talented guys and girls. So we also learned that it takes time. There's a lot of failure through this process. It took us maybe 6 to 9 months to really start to get into the groove. And yeah, common theme from tonight, I think that we've found that small teams really perform much better for us, and actually you can't get too small. We've got 3 people that are making the third of the revenue of the company, and they're the most junior, and they're the happiest group, happiest team. So that was it. Hopefully it was interesting. Thank you.